Hello, everyone. First, I would like to say thank you for having me today. I am thrilled to be here. I have just returned from the AP reading, where I have been grading for, I think, 3 years straight. So, I know. When I get done, I'm going to. Did you go? Okay. Well, yeah, I hear you. So I'm thrilled to just be communicating with humans. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of address before we get into the broader presentation is, how does migration connect with civics? So why is it, am I even here? And as I was thinking about it, to me, civics means the responsibilities, tools, and resources you have to make decisions within your communities. And so if you have an awareness of who's in your community and what their history is, I think that that can assist you in more efficiently and inclusively making decisions for those communities. So that's my pitch for why this connects, okay? So what we're going to look at today is we're just going to examine this migration trunk. It's our most recent trunk that we've developed. And the objective is to take a look at all the different elements that go along with migration, different types of migration. We developed this trunk because when I came into the Oklahoma History Center, I had taught geography, and I didn't notice that a lot of our trunks had geographic concepts kind of centered. So I wanted to have one of those. So we decided to work on migration in Oklahoma. If you ask me, Oklahoma's story is the story of migration. Virtually everybody had to come from somewhere else to get here. There's a handful of indigenous groups, the Caddo, the Wichita, the Osage, and the Apache in the West. So beyond that, everybody had to get here some kind of way. So what we're going to do is we are going to take a look at these objects that comes in the trunks. I set an object near you if I was able to figure out you were sitting here. Take a look, share with your seat mates, especially if you don't have an object, and try to come up with one question or one observation. You don't have to know what group it is associated with. You can just describe what the object is, describe something that is meaningful for you with the object. Or if you have no idea at all, you can ask a question. So I'm going to give you a minute to come up with that. All right. So who has a question or observation about their object? And when you talk about your object, please hold it up so that people can see. Go ahead.
What does a lava rock have to do with migration?
That's an excellent question. And especially, what did a lava rock have to do with migration in Oklahoma? To my mind, there's not really places you can go in Oklahoma where you can scavenge lava rocks too easily. So what does a lava rock have to do with migration to Oklahoma? Well, that signifies a tribal nation called the Modoc. Has anybody ever heard of the Modoc? And what's very interesting about them at the History Center, which I'm sure many of you have been to, when you go into the American Indian Gallery, you see a big map, and it shows where everybody originated in. And I was very curious because the only group that comes from the West Coast is the Modoc. So that caused me to try to investigate why they had come. They're an outlier. So what explains that? Well, that lava rock signifies the war of resistance that they put on with the United States Army. And what they did was, sometimes my pronunciations are not great because mostly I learn these new words through reading, but Tule Lake, Tule in California, has lava beds around it. And they were very familiar with that area. And they were able to establish such strong fortifications and defenses that 50 of their people, 50 warriors, were able to hold off 3,000 soldiers for over 5 months. So for some of your students who are interested in military history and battles and things like that, that is a pretty amazing story because it is one of those David and Goliath stories. What happened was when they came to the peace table to negotiate an end to this war, the Modoc actually assassinated some of the United States delegation. And then after that, it was a case where they were rounded up and treated as prisoners of war and sent to Fort Sill, I believe. And so the Modoc Nation continues in Oklahoma today. And they're putting out a video. I don't know if it's ready yet, but you can go to their website, putting out a video on their history. So I'm looking forward to that. What do you think?
The Modoc Nation, like what region in Oklahoma are
They're in the Northeast. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, the smaller ones, right? Okay, what else?
We have a shirt from Langston University,
Okay.
which is Oklahoma's historically Black college.
Exactly. So one of the things it's important to point out to students, I think, is the rich history of Black Oklahomans and the way they came here. There is a unique story to tell. And I think that that is rooted in the fact that the original Indian removal brought the 5 tribes who had portions of their tribes that were slaveholders. So they brought their enslaved populations with them. After the Civil War, they were granted, well, when allotment came, they were granted allotments. And so in this instance, we see in the post-Civil War situation, no land was given to the freedmen in the South, but land was provided to the freedmen in Oklahoma. This served as kind of magnets for freedmen coming to the South. And so it resulted in a secondary migration of the freedmen from the South, and it resulted in the development of all Black towns. Oklahoma has the largest number of all Black towns in the United States. And so Langston is definitely a symbol of that and its continuing relevance. Okay, let's do one more.
I'd say music.
Okay.
Everybody brings their own music, whether it's tribal
Mm-hmm.
or even like Woody Guthrie help tell their tales.
Absolutely. So music is central to all cultures, and that ukulele applies to many different cultures. But I'm really glad that you brought that up because this story is fascinating to me. So I put that ukulele in the trunk because we have a pretty significant population of Marshallese. Have you heard of that? Okay, in Enid, exactly. So how did the Marshallese, why would they come to, I mean, they have a paradise that they're living in the Pacific, and they're coming to a landlocked state? For what reason?
That's what it is for the Chickees population.
Absolutely. So the most recent reason is climate change. There's sea rise, and they're literally losing their territory. Previous to that, the land that the Marshallese and the Micronesians, another group that's closely associated, they actually were given as a trust territory by the United Nations after World War II. And then the United States dropped 67 atomic bombs on their territory. It actually fouled the land so badly that they still to this day have to eat shelf-stable food that's brought in from other places. As you would think, there's probably going to be some limited economic development in an environment such as that. And so there's a special agreement that we have called COFA, which is weird if you study immigration. It allows them to come to work in the United States, but they are not immigrants. They're not declared immigrants. They're limited to access benefits from the federal government, so they can't get like SNAP benefits or anything like that. But they can join the military. There's a significant number that has joined the military. And they work in Enid, around Enid, because of, anybody know what the big employer there is for the Marshallese population? It's a meat packing factory. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that has brought so many different communities to Oklahoma recently. So once the meat packing factories, they used to be on the East Coast, and they started unionizing, and then the meat packing factory bosses decided that they were going to move to places that did not have unions. Yes.
Do they have voters' rights, and what does citizenship look like?
That's a great question. They do not have voters' rights, and they don't necessarily have a pathway to citizenship. So they kind of live in a gray world. They're not undocumented. ICE isn't going to come and take them away.
Are they blocked from applying for citizenship?
I don't think they're blocked from applying for citizenship, but it's not like an easy path. So you're going to have a significant number that want to gain citizenship benefits. So you probably have a long list. And so, yes.
So they fall into the percentages of all the other places around the world, and only so many can apply for citizenship.
Right. Right.
Oh.
Okay. All right. So.
It's really hard for them even to, like, once their numbers up to get. I'm from Phoenix, and the number that I know that actually applied, and once they actually got through it's extremely hard for them to do it. And I'm talking to people, like the person I know has lived here his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Like I went to school with him, I graduated with him, and he still had a very hard time. And it bothers him a little bit because his children are actually citizens because he married it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard. Like his numbers come up, I think, twice, and the first time he didn't go, he for some reason didn't have all the paperwork. But he was like, I wasn't told I needed that paperwork, and it's a huge thing. And even then, in Enid, a lot of times culturally, they're very down on. I don't like we didn't, but I know a lot of like and this is coming from the perspective of a teenager who's understanding, but a lot of people who are in charge are very rude to them. Like they just got like a Marshallese choir, but he can only do it for like 2 years, and then he retired and his son was gonna take over. And they made it very clear that that choir wasn't gonna be allowed. And it was something that was done at Enid High. I know I think he's just gonna do the choir anyway, but he was told specifically at one point.
So thank you for that observation. I appreciate that. That's why the ukulele is in there, because love of music is so very noted in any newspaper article that you read. The choir group, the choral group, I've seen several newspaper articles about that group.
And, yeah, they're very good and very musical, but they would not, for a very long time, would not like even go and be in choir even in school, because they didn't understand the type of music and thought they would be fun.
Right. And then I was talking to a teacher who taught around Enid, and he was a guitar teacher, but he was modifying what he was doing because the students were interested in ukulele more than guitar. So that I think that's really interesting. You don't want to be a rock and roll star, so okay. So anywho, those are what those hands-on objects are. Do we have any last minute questions that popped into your head concerning the objects?
I don't know what this is, but it looks like it might be somewhat musical.
Oh, okay.
I
So
don't know.
it is not. It is, it belongs in, anybody recognize this? It is not.
Okay.
I was hoping somebody would recognize it so they could say the word, because I say the word poorly every time. It's a molino, and so it makes Mexican hot chocolate. And so that makes sense. Once you see this, you can tell that it's designed to froth. So
Okay.
yeah.
Frother.
Yes, that's correct. All right. Let's see here. Okay, well, let me tell you what else is in the trunk, and then we can talk about maybe how to implement this in your classroom. I would love for you to think about that and for us to have a discussion about things that you think you could do. I came up with some ideas, but that doesn't necessarily mean I came up with the best ideas. So if you have some observations about how you can implement this in your classroom, I think it's got potential to work in several different classes. So let's take a look at the different types of things that you'll find in the curriculum guide and with the activities that we have developed. So the first thing that you'll see when you open up the curriculum guide is a timeline, and it orders the migration of groups to Oklahoma from the 1600s to the 2000s. And I think that what that shows to students first is a sense of change over time. So Oklahoma is not moving, it's in the same spot, but what we know as Oklahoma changes. So I think it's a great opportunity to talk about the 5 themes of geography, because it is demonstrated here. And then the other thing that I think it shows, because it's broken down by decade and then it's broken down by years, is how busy Oklahoma is in receiving different groups. So I think it shows how central Oklahoma is to migration. The second thing that you will see when you open up the curriculum guide is a guideline to different groups, and it talks about where they originated from. It talks about why they left. So pushes, and then it talks about why Oklahoma, and so pools, and then it talks about what historical forces are at work. I think that part right there. So for example, with the checks, inexpensive, safe, rapid transatlantic transportation, non-Indian settlement, land runs, the creation of ethnic enclaves, and internal migrations. I think that's a great opportunity for you to take a look at standards and see which standards you can address by using these migration guides. And then it talks about what happened once they arrived. This is not exhaustive, but it is designed to just equip people with a basic understanding of the migration of various groups. There are 70 different groups included, and I made sure to include the 39 federally recognized tribes, all of them, because sometimes we take a sampling, and I thought for this particular topic, we needed to know the migration stories. And I haven't developed an activity on it yet, but there is ample opportunity to kind of take different groups who have come from similar places and draw some conclusions about what those migrations were like. So the 5 tribes have similar, not identical, but they have a similar migration story. Well, there's a ton of tribes from the Ohio River Valley that came. And so what do they share in their migration stories? And that's a great way to get students to look at kind of patterns, I think. Any questions so far? Go ahead.
Was this material written with a certain age bracket or demographic in mind?
It's written for the teacher. So it is written so that the teacher can take that material and then readapt it for the students. But if you have high school students, I think they can handle it. The next thing that is included in the immigration or in the curriculum guide, and what you'll get when you check out this trunk is you'll get a page that confirms when you checked it out, but it'll also have a link that will be available for that week. So if you want to pull your slides from that website, you can, instead of trying to go through a lot of different processes to get your slides to work. So this is a summary of immigration policy in the United States. It goes through and it looks at every single major immigration law, policy, and court case. And it is many different slides. No one would ever go through all of that with their students. Their students would rebel. And so the idea is to pull out what's going to work for your particular topic. I think this has great potential for government class. It has good potential for Oklahoma history, and it has good potential for United States history. It links to the primary source on each of the pages. So if you need to go look at the court case, or you want to show your students with this emphasis on primary sources, you can click that and the students can examine the primary source. I think it has potential also to kind of, because you can pull out different topics. You can do immigration post 65, you can do court cases, you can do immigration of the 19th century and see how that's changed over time. So I think that it will help for different areas of focus, and it basically just summarizes what those different laws did. And it goes up to the last administration as far as what it covers. After that, there are some article topics that I was thinking, you know, what's related to migration in Oklahoma? So one of the topics, one of the articles in there is about refugees in Oklahoma. And that was a pretty cool thing to study about and learn about, because Oklahoma's had a pretty central role in settling refugees, and that continues today. And that's a great story to share with your students, especially if you're working on maybe that inquiry model that has the taking informed action, because you can set it up by talking about Oklahoma's role with refugee resettlement, and then set them up to do an action to support refugees today. Additionally, it talks about English language learning, and there's just a lot of confusion about how that process works in schools. So it looks at one school district and how they do English language learning. Out migration during the Great Depression, obviously that had to go in there. There's just, I mean, that's what we're known for. And then bird migrations through Oklahoma, because we try to be multidisciplinary. So then that was fun and interesting to study about after all the heavy, well, there was some sad news with the birds too, so. Turn off your lights outside, your street lights during migration season.
We can't turn on for street lights.
Just during migration
But
season.
we don't have control. That's the city.
Oh, your porch light.
Oh, okay.
Just do your porch light and you'll be good. Okay. All right, the next section is about different activities that we developed in order to make sure that you are able to implement this in a variety of classes, especially if you're thinking about like working as a team. To look at migration, we would love for you to, you know, implement these different activities. The central piece that I think is brilliant and I love so much is this Where the Rainbow Ends. This is a document, a book published by Oklahoma City Department of Language and Cultural Services, and it works with newcomer students. So you're familiar with what newcomers are, yes or no? Okay. So what they did was they went through and wrote down their migration stories. And this documents the last 4 or 5 years of immigration. And they didn't realize, when I talked to the people that were gathering these stories for this book, they didn't realize they were doing a history. They thought that they were working with students and helping them talk about, you know, learn English and stuff, you know. And I was like, well, it's a little more than that. So the activity that we have for this is students go through and read these. And because some of the stories are hard, we have a little activity where they explore speculative fiction, so science fiction, fantastic tales, mythology, and they transform one of the stories into one of these larger than life tales to try to kind of think about how you tell difficult stories in different communities. Sometimes science fiction helps you tell those tales without kind of the controversies that exist with a straightforward nonfiction piece. So there's also activities, this one's designed for the 6th and 7th graders so that they can understand migration concepts. So how did we get to Oklahoma? I think this would be great to just start the year with, because especially 6th grade, because you're starting with home, you're starting with something that's relevant to the students, something that they identify with, and then you're going to go out to the rest of the Western Hemisphere. So you can always reach back to what you've done that first week or second week. And it goes through and it works with students to try to understand what different types of migrations are. So forced migration or an out migration. And they go through and they learn about the different groups. You assign it to them. And then they figure out what the pushes and pulls are. They figure out what kind of migration they experience. So there is information about how to make a story map, which is probably going to work I could see with some assistance that may be working with your fourth graders, or an abbreviated version of that, maybe a slide. And then the students get a little bit of digital skills in building interactive maps. That way, it was really simple for me to learn, and so that means fourth graders can learn it, I think. And then we also have some other activities as well. There was animal migrations and challenges. I think that'd be good for Earth Day or science. Weaving a friendship bracelet. That is great for an art class or working with the students during testing because they have to be quiet all the time. So having them learn this new skill is something that can assist with that. And then how can having too much of something make you poor is an economics lesson in there. And it's about how during the early part of the Great Depression, there was oversupply, so much oversupply that it crashed the demand. And so there's a ton of like primary sources in this one. It has a sources packet that you can maybe spread around with classes, and they have to interpret graphs. They look at different historical photographs, drawing conclusions, reading newspaper articles. Again, this is all digital that you can access, but this is here for teachers who don't want to do that. So, and it gives you an idea of what's there as well. So. Any questions? Mm-hmm. So if you send me an email, I'll send you the email address that you go to request a book. So it's the folks in the Oklahoma Language and Cultural Services Department. And they have a couple of volumes. So yes.
If it's the end of your presentation.
That's where we're at.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure you didn't answer it later on. But so I guess what I'm understanding is your presentation is over partnerships with schools, correct? Or with teachers?
So this trunk is something that you can check out.
Okay, so
yes, ma'am.
That's with teachers or with the school?
Either.
Either?
We check it out to a large number of groups. So
okay.
yeah.
So my question is, with the general environment of resistance to true history,
yes.
I wanted to know if you could elaborate on what it's been like trying to present this, whether to teachers or to schools in Oklahoma.
Absolutely, and I have done that to a certain extent. It's a new trunk, so deploying this is not been a long-term thing, but the trunk we did before this was Latino history in Oklahoma. So those two together certainly could cause some conversation around folks who have ideas about what is being taught and whether or not that's appropriate for students. And so here's general observations. Number one, teachers and schools are sympathetic to the cause. And so there is not a commitment to that narrative you see outside of the school walls that is something I've confronted in classes. And so that is what I have experienced in the kind of presentations that I've had thus far. But there is, second observation, a lot of concern about whether like where this is all headed, like a general anxiety, for sure. I totally agree with you because I teach too. And so here's what I think that this does. Everything here is standards based. And so when you can say, this addresses this standard and all of these laws and kind of assertions about what's appropriate to be taught, the standards were developed by the teachers themselves that are experts on the topic about what they thought that students needed to learn. And any community member can have a part to say on the standards. Is that right?
And, moreover, the standards are approved by the state legislature.
Mm-hmm.
So I think making it standards-based, but also I like in the teacher's guide that you have a variety of migration stories. And the intent behind that, our language of the standards is rather general, so that communities can kind of customize those migration stories to their community.
Mm-hmm.
So so if you're in Enid and you're talking, you want to highlight the Marshallese, you have that resource where that may not be as germane to the conversation as it is, in Norman as it is there. So that's part of it as well. But I also think putting the evidence in front of the students, and it's a difference of like who's forming the opinion. Am I the teacher forming an opinion to share with the students? Or am I giving evidence and artifacts to students and they develop their own opinion?
Right.
So that interpretation piece, who's doing that for the students, I think is really key in that argument.
Right.
And so I know you guys don't know me. I work for Norman Public Schools. I'm the social studies coordinator. So this is a conversation I have a lot with our teachers locally.
Okay, yeah, no, I guess my background is in education as well. My undergrad is in education, so I know that the curriculum is not really set at that school level, and so that was my question.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the ultimate goal of my question was if there was any resistance met with you trying to incorporate or allow this opportunity for schools or teachers from the people who actually create the curriculum at the state level.
Well, you're welcome to check out the box, and then you present it, and you can, like she said, you can pick out what you want to use, what maybe might not work well in your community. I've never gotten this box, but I've gotten like the 1930s box, and I use it, during the Depression and different stuff. So you can use the stuff any which way you want to do it. She's not going to come in and present it. You're going to check it out from them for a week, and then you can use what you want to, which is what's great about this is that she's kind of broken it down into different pieces. So you may not use all of it. You may only want to use one part of it. Like the court cases, like she said, would be great to use like in a government class, and you only want to use that part, you can. But you do have all of these resources at your availability to use for the week, or somebody else in your building can use it, and they can use whichever one
Yeah,
they
I get that. Are you understanding, am I conveying the question
Yes.
correctly? I understand what the box is used for, that wasn't really my question.
So I think that the frankest answer to your question is the schools and the school districts are not making decisions about whether or not the boxes get used.
Okay.
And so like we have one public school district at the district level that gets a lot of the cultural group boxes and displays those and has the students come and look.
Okay, gotcha.
Other than that, I don't have conversations with principals and superintendents for the most
That
part.
was my question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
All right. That was a great question. Yes.
I do have a quick comment. If you have pushback from because obviously, as you kind of mentioned, where we're headed, some of the laws that are passed, if a parent complains,
Yeah.
you just say, well, side to the standard. If you want to complain, you can go to
That's
to the state level and complain there if you want to.
Mhm.
Most of the time, curriculum coordinators, because mine's David Burton on more schools, they tell us we got, as long as you connect it, we got you. So it's not I'm worried to use it for any sad reason or anything like that. But I do have a question. The booklet from a planning ahead situation. Are we able to look at that before time to kind of map it out for the time?
That is the number one question that I'm trying to figure out a smooth way to service teachers, because in general, we just check it out the week of. But you can check it out anytime before when you think you're going to implement it. Or if you want to contact me, I can have it ready for you and you can just stay at the museum and look at it. And then we'll give you a pass to go through the museum and you won't pay for that either. So we can definitely come up with creative ways to get it to you. I'm thinking maybe like,
I've gotten an email, I've asked that before too, like I've gotten an email and they basically gave me a breakdown on what was in there and I could see kind of a look. I don't remember who sent me the email.
right.
It gave me like pre-knowledge to be able to know, oh, okay, that gave me the reason why I wanted that box over this box.
Uh-huh.
So somewhere there is something. I don't know if it's on the
Well,
site
I'll
or
be hitting those
something.
files when I get home. So that's a great question. And if you like, I think that probably that's the best I have right now, because if we make it freely available, we can't get the numbers. And the way we show to the state legislature that we're worth what we are getting paid for is the numbers that we do. So
So I could like check it out.
absolutely, absolutely. For sure.
What does the checkout process look like?
That is a great question. That's the last part of my presentation. The website that you go to is okhistory.org. Andy, will they have my contact information? Okay.
Do you have a bank first in your community?
I'm sure.
It'll be free.
So if you come pick up the trunks, it is free for you to use for a week. If you need it more than a week, we can usually work with you. What we do is we just look to see if somebody else has checked it out. And if not, then we are more than happy to check it out to you for the time that you need. A lot of summer programs are using these as well. So there's some creative uses. Civic organizations occasionally will use these as well because adults sometimes like an artifact in front of them too. So keep that in mind. The way you go to check out a trunk or learn what the different trunks that we have available are is you go to learn. And then this just adorable child painting. And then we go to the traveling trunk section. And I would say that more than most museums, we are very communicative. So you have all kinds of information to read should you want it. In general, I dislike calling a place to find out. I'd rather learn from their website, but if you want to call, you can too. That's fine. And so if you want to see what the trunk topics are, you can go here. And we have the trunk contents that you can take a look at. And then we also, if we can, cross-reference stuff that we have. And then if you want to check out a trunk, you just click request a trunk and then you fill that out. It comes to me and I put it in the scheduler. And then since we have a little bit of time, I would like to show you this if you have no objections. And even if you do. So. If you go to education and you go to resources, I love that picture so much. We developed out a list of resources for all of the standards. So if we go to this one right here on race relations in Oklahoma, there are lesson plans that are inquiry there. There are e-exhibits that you can learn about or give to your students to learn about. This one specifically addresses the standard, the causes and effects of the Tulsa Race Massacre. So it spends a lot of time on causes and effects and less time on the massacre. It has encyclopedia articles. It has online little books. The Blacks in Oklahoma is actually a pretty good book. It was published in 1980, but it's got some great information. And then other resources that you might find. So photos that you could use, and then we wanted to make sure that even if it wasn't our primary source, there were primary sources that you could use. So this one has photographs from the Tulsa Race Massacre. I think this is about Mary Parrish's, yeah. No, that might be BC Franklin's. And so, and then it also has additional resources. So it has the inquiry-driven lesson plans from Tulsa Public Schools. You know, not all school districts have the funding to do elaborate curriculum. So it's good to ride the backs of those school districts that do. Yes.
My question is for families who are choosing to homeschool or just would rather play a more intimate part in their own child's education, are they able to check out a trunk?
Yes.
Okay, because I noticed on the request form it was asterisked as the school name needing to be provided.
Mm-hmm.
If so, what would they?
They just put Jones Homeschool or Classroom Collective. So they usually have if it's a co-op, they usually have like a name for themselves. But I do check out to homeschool parents too. So sometimes my numbers are like 5. So that's totally fine. All right. Any other questions for me? Yes.
Immigration's a very complicated subject. And I just wondered, is it possible to teach them how immigration law varies from country to country, or like give them better understanding of how it works? Because, you know, the general argument is, but I know an immigrant, but they came here legally.
Right, absolutely. So I think that there is no article that I have written in the curriculum guide that addresses that. But like Jane was saying, those slides on immigration, they summarize the law. And so once you go through and you see with like the Hart-Celler Act and they adjusted the ratios and all of that, like if you're being really introspective or you're making kind of comments to your students, you can point out, well, what do you think would happen from a country that sends a lot of migrants? What would happen to that legal process? Would they take a long time? And usually there's students in the class that can go, oh yeah, I can tell you about that too. So opening that up. So I think that the slides can possibly get you there, especially if you spend some time with it and you're thoughtful. You can add slides too, you know, so you can always put in stuff that you think works for your students. All right. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Now, when you get the trunks, I know the last time I inquired about it, my principal was not being, nice. I'm in different district now, so
Okay.
things could change. When you return the box, can you ship it through like UPS? Because I know at one point you had to bring it back physically.
You can ship it, but you have to pay for shipping. And so as she was saying with the Bank First, if you have a Bank First in your community, you can reach out and see if they would be willing, because they sponsor the trunk program. And so oftentimes they're willing to support you in that way. Additionally, if you live too far, one of the things that has worked, not 100% of the time, but has worked occasionally, is in the summer or in the spring, asking your legislator to grab it. They're across the street, and they can come drop it off at the library, and you can go pick it up. And so oftentimes they're willing to do that to get those points. So.